You are listening to 13 Past Midnight with Steve Stockton.
Good evening once again, and thank you for tuning in to 13 Past Midnight. Tonight we have a double feature for you. Two creepy stories that are bizarre beyond belief. First up is a listener story. This is titled The Ghostly Geese, and it's sent in by Herman G. Herman writes, "The strangest thing I ever had happen to me was when I was working on my daddy's farm in Kentucky, way back when I was just a boy. We raised corn and tobacco, as well as pigs, cows, and other livestock. We also had a huge garden far down below the barn where we raised other vegetables destined for the family dinner table. Daddy had instructed me to take one of our mules in a wagon out to a certain area down by the creek and fill the wagon full of the rich topsoil that could be found nearby. Kind of disgruntled at such a hard chore, I begrudgingly hitched the mule to the wagon, tossed a shovel in the back, and headed off. It was a long way down there, and I was feeling kind of lazy that day. So I decided instead to get some rich dirt from a closer place I knew of, about a mile or so closer. It was a huge mound of dirt that looked like it had been there a long time, and I wondered why we'd never used it before. I hopped off the wagon, and just about the time I broke into the rich dirt with a shovel, the oddest thing occurred. I heard what sounded like a flock of geese. I stopped and looked up, but didn't see anything in the sky. It was still early in the morning, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. I started to dig again, and once again, I heard the geese start up. Mystified, I stopped shoveling and began looking around, trying to find out where the sound was coming from. Now, it wasn't just a few geese, but it sounded like a whole huge flock or gaggle of geese, which is the correct term. Even though the dirt pile backed up to the woods, there were no geese in the trees. But every time I started to dig, the noise seemed to get closer and louder. Finally, it sounded like they were all around me, very close. By this point, I was spooked and decided to give up on the easy way and go down to the creek and get the dirt like I was told to in the first place. It was a lot of hard, sweaty work, but by lunchtime I had a wagon full of the rich loam my daddy wanted for the garden. When I got back, he met me at the garden with another shovel and thankfully helped me unload the wagon. As we shoveled the dirt into the garden, I sort of told on myself and mentioned that I'd started to get the dirt from another place until the sound of the geese had scared me away. My father stopped shoveling and gave me a very stern look. "Don't ever dig in that mound of dirt again," he stated solemnly. "That's an Indian burial mound, and it would be disrespectful to disturb them." I was both shocked and shamed. To this day, I believe the noises I heard were the spirits of the Native Americans, warning me that they did not want their resting place disturbed. Thank you, Herman. That's a great story. Very, very creepy indeed. Next up, I thought I'd read one of my stories from my book, My Strange World, which is a collection of my own personal encounters. I call this story The Bewitched Mirror. Normally, when you look into a mirror, you see an exact opposite reflection. In other words, if you move your left hand, your mirrored reflection appears to move the right hand, and so on and so forth. But what if a mirror reflected just the opposite? In effect, giving you the same view of yourself that everyone else sees. Well, now in the 21st century, the technology does exist. While researching this entry, I found such a mirror. It uses a flat-screen TV and some cameras. However, back in the mid-1970s, I encountered a mirror in an antique shop, which gave me my reflection as everyone else would see me, over 3 decades before the technology existed. This is a short but very weird tale. I was in an antique shop with my parents, somewhere in East Tennessee, if memory serves correct. The year would have been around 1972 or 1973, making me about 9 or 10 years old. My parents were antique dealers themselves, with active booths in several area antique malls during the 1970s and 80s. On any given weekend, we would visit a multitude of antique shops, junk stores, thrifts, garage sales, and estate auctions. In this one particular shop, I was wandering around in the back of the store, not looking at anything in particular. We'd been at this all day, and I was ready to get home and relax with a book or some television. Suddenly, something caught my eye. It was a very tall and ornately carved mirror. The wood was black and very goth-looking, even at a time before such an aesthetic existed, and I'm talking modern goth here, not the ancient Goths or the Visigoths. I stood looking over the strange carvings in the black wood of the mirror and raised my hand to have a sip from the bottle of soda I was carrying. I noticed immediately that instead of seeing my reflection in the mirror, I was seeing the opposite. If I raised my right hand, I saw myself raise my right hand in the mirror instead of my reflected left as normal. In short, instead of seeing a backwards reflection, I was seeing myself exactly as other people would see me. And I was amazed at the novelty of the mirror and stood in front of it making motions and silly faces till my parents called for me to leave. It wasn't until later in my teenage years that I realized that what I had witnessed in the mirror was absolutely impossible, at least under normal conditions, in what appeared to be an old, flat glass mirror with the edges of the silvering beginning to flake off. I never saw the mirror again, and remained unsure even which shop it had been in. I find it odd, thinking that somewhere, out there, someone may have a dusty old mirror sitting in their garage. Not just any old mirror, mind you, but a bewitched mirror that must have come straight from the night gallery. If you ever had a strange experience with a mirror, I'd love to hear about it. As always, my contact information can be found in the description.